The sun bled low over Salt Creek when the drifter rode in, a shape cut from dust and silence. His horse was half-starved, ribs like dry wood under skin. No one in that town had seen rain in 47 days. The ground cracked like old lips. The air was the kind that made men quiet. He came down the single dirt road, past the leaning saloon and the church that hadn't held a sermon in months. Every window seemed to watch. Even the horses in the stable turned their heads slow, uneasy, as if something about the man bent the air wrong. They said later that his name was Jonas Vale, but no one knew for sure. Some said he was a bounty man. Others said a deserter from the Union. Whatever he was, he carried something inside him heavier than the dust on his coat. At the edge of town, the sheriff leaned against a porch post, chewing a twig. Sheriff Ames was an old man of the plains, half lawman, half ghost already. He nodded as the rider passed. "Long ride?" he asked. Jonas didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on something behind Ames, something nobody else could see. Finally, he said, "Longer than it should have been." That night, the drifter took a room at Harlan's saloon, upstairs where the floorboards whined like dying coyotes. The men below kept to themselves, the usual, whiskey, cards, and the slow crawl of the night. But when Jonas stepped in, the talk stuttered. It wasn't just his silence, it was his eyes. They were tired in a way that made other men feel their own sins. Harlan, the saloon keeper, filled him a glass and asked where he was headed. Jonas said nowhere and left it at that. Hours passed. The lamp smoke thickened and the air turned mean. The talk drifted toward the mine, the one up the ridge, closed after the cave-in last winter. 6 men dead, they said, though nobody ever found the bodies. One of the miners, a broad man named Keller, laughed. "Ain't nothing left up there but bones and bad air." Some nights, though, he tapped his temple. "I swear I hear them still." Jonas looked up slow. "Hear who?" Keller smiled, uneasy. "The ones buried under. They knock sometimes. When the wind's right." A silence followed. Even the piano went still. Jonas drank his whiskey and said, "Maybe they're not under. Maybe they just never left." Later, when he went to his room, Keller swore he saw Jonas stop on the stairs, not to rest, but to listen. Like he heard something, a voice, or breathing that wasn't his. That night Jonas dreamed. He stood at the mouth of a mine, the Salt Ridge shaft, and there were 6 shadows waiting, faces hidden. One of them whispered, "You came back too soon." He woke with his gun in his hand, the room slick with sweat though the air was cold. The next morning he found Sheriff Ames sitting by the well. The old man squinted up at him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jonas said, "Ghosts don't bother me." Ames studied him. "They should. Out here they don't die easy." By noon, Jonas was seen walking toward the ridge, the abandoned mine. A crow followed him the whole way. The men in town watched from a distance. No one else dared go near that place since the collapse. They said the air tasted wrong up there and like iron and rot. Hours passed before Jonas came back down. His eyes were red, his hands black with dust. He didn't speak a word. That night, the first knocking started. At Harlan's saloon, where the wind could whistle through every crack, the men heard it, a slow, hollow tap, 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 like knuckles on wood. It came from below, through the floor. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all thought the same thing. The mine. Jonas sat still, staring into the dark corner of the room. The tapping stopped. Then faintly, it started again, but faster, like someone trying to get out. Keller spat and stood up. "Ain't no ghosts. Ain't nothing down there but rats and echoes." Jonas didn't move. He whispered almost to himself, "Echoes can lie." The lamp flickered, and then, just like that, the sound was gone. The men exhaled together, the way men do when they've survived something small but important. They poured whiskey, laughed too loud, forced the night back into its shape. But Jonas Vale didn't drink. He kept watching the corner and like he was waiting for it to move. When the saloon emptied, he stayed behind. Only the wind and the sound of the sign creaking outside. He reached into his coat and pulled something out, a small metal tag, bent and rusted. A miner's tag. Number 27, he turned it over in his hand. There was blood dried into the grooves, he whispered. "You weren't supposed to find me, outside?" The wind stopped all at once, and in that perfect silence, a single knock answered from beneath the floor. Morning came to Salt Creek like a curse. The air was pale and thin, stretched over the town like old skin. Harlan found Jonas sitting outside the saloon before dawn, eyes open, unmoving as if he hadn't slept at all. The miner's tag still hung between his fingers, spinning gently in the wind. "Hell you doing out here all night?" Harlan asked, rubbing his arms against the cold. Jonas didn't look up. "Listen," Harlan frowned. "To what?" "The ground." Harlan crouched. The only sound was the rattle of the windmill and the dry sigh of sand across the boards. "Don't hear nothing." Jonas's lips twitched. Not a smile, not a frown. "You will." He got up, brushed the dust off his coat, and walked toward the ridge again. Same as yesterday. Same slow, deliberate walk like a man following a voice only he could hear. By noon, the town was uneasy. Sheriff Ames stood in the middle of Main Street, hat pulled low, squinting toward the hills. "Ain't right," he muttered. "A man don't go up there twice unless he's digging for trouble." Keller and two others, Briggs and Cole, both miners before the collapse, stood nearby. Their faces were hollow, shadows under their eyes. Briggs said, "Maybe he's looking for what we left." Ames turned. "And what's that?" Briggs swallowed. "Them 6 men." The sheriff spat into the dust. "You left 'em buried same as they fell. That's God's business now." Cole shifted his weight. "Ain't sure God's been near Salt Creek for a spell." By sundown, Jonas still hadn't come back. The sky went from red to violet, and the ridge turned black as an open grave. Then came the smell. It rolled down the wind, not rot, not quite. Something like metal and wet stone. Harlan said it made the back of his throat itch. That night, Keller went looking for Jonas. He didn't tell anyone. Just took a lantern, a shovel, and a flask and started up the trail. The mine mouth waited like a wound in the hillside. Boards half collapsed, a cold breath leaking out of the dark. Keller called out. "Vale, you up here?" Nothing. He stepped closer, lifted the lantern. The inside glistened wet, though there hadn't been rain in months. Something caught his eye, a set of footprints leading inside. Fresh. Son of a... He tightened his grip on the shovel and followed. Inside, the mine whispered. Not words, not quite, just the sound of earth remembering. Every drip, every creak seemed too deliberate. The air was thick. The lantern flame leaned sideways as if something breathed against it. Deeper in, Keller found the first thing wrong. A pickaxe driven straight into the wall, handle splintered, like it had been swung in rage. Then a rope, then a hat, then Jonas Vale's voice somewhere ahead, calm, talking low like to another man. Keller froze. Jonas said, "I told you. I didn't mean to leave you down here." A pause, a scrape. Then quiet laughter. Keller stepped forward, lantern trembling. "Jonas?" The laughter stopped. "Keller," Jonas said from the dark. His voice didn't sound surprised, it sounded tired. "You came back. Back from where?" "From the hole." "Don't you remember?" Keller swallowed hard. "Ain't never been down this far." Jonas stepped into the lantern light. His face was streaked with dust and something darker. His eyes didn't look right, unfocused, like a man looking through someone instead of at them. "They're restless," he said. "They don't like how you sealed them in." "What are you talking about?" Keller's voice cracked. Jonas tilted his head. "You heard 'em last night. The knocking." "That weren't no ghost," Jonas interrupted. "It's not ghosts. It's memory. This place remembers every sound, every sin. You think you left 'em, Keller, but you didn't. You brought 'em with you." Keller stepped back. "You're sick, Vale." Jonas smiled faintly. "Aren't we all?" Something moved behind him in the dark. A shuffling sound, soft. "Keller," Jonas whispered. "Don't turn around." Keller turned. For a moment, the lantern caught something. A figure, hunched, slick with dust, eyes black and wide as the shaft. Then the light went out. The scream that followed rolled down the ridge and reached the town like thunder from the grave. They found Keller's body the next morning, just past the mine's entrance. His face was gray, eyes open, mouth full of dirt. No blood, no wound, just dead, as if something had squeezed the life out of him from the inside. Sheriff Ames had seen death before, too much of it, but not like that. "What did you see up there?" he asked Jonas, who stood silent beside the mine. Jonas didn't answer. Ames grabbed his collar. "Tell me." Jonas finally looked at him, eyes burning under the hat brim. He turned around. That night no one went near the saloon. The men sat in the sheriff's office, candles burning low, guns on their laps. Every creak made them flinch, Briggs muttered. Ain't the mine. It's him. He brought something with him, Cole said. Ain't no man brings death like that without reason. Ames said nothing. He just watched the window, waiting for dawn that wouldn't come. Because in the dead of night, they heard it again, the knocking. But this time, it didn't come from the mine, it came from beneath the sheriff's floorboards. 3 slow knocks, then 2. Then 1, Jonas Vale, sitting in the corner, smiled like he'd been waiting for it. Told you, he whispered. You don't leave this place. It leaves you. Outside, the wind started to howl, not wild but deliberate, like a voice stretched thin across the desert, calling them back to the ridge. And when morning came, the mine was open again, its timbers pried apart from the inside. By the 3rd day, Salt Creek had turned quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. No laughter. No hammering from the blacksmith. No boots on the street. Just the wind. Sheriff Ames sat on his porch, shotgun across his knees, staring at the horizon as though he expected the sun itself to betray him next. The bodies didn't last long in that heat, so they'd buried Keller before dawn. Or at least they thought they had. A hole in the dry ground behind the church. A wooden cross and a prayer Ames couldn't finish. When he turned to walk back, Jonas Vale was already there, standing at the edge of town, coat still dusted from the ridge. You shouldn't have buried him, Jonas said. Ames squinted. You'd rather leave him to rot? Jonas's voice was low but steady. He wasn't done yet. The sheriff's jaw tightened. You're starting to talk like a ghost yourself. Jonas looked toward the hills. Maybe that's all any of us are. Ames didn't reply. He couldn't, because for the first time in weeks, he could smell the mine from here. That same metallic tang, faint but sharp, like the earth was bleeding. Inside Harlan's saloon, only 3 men remained besides the barkeep himself. Briggs, Cole, and a half-mad prospector named Milo, who'd once worked the Salt Ridge tunnels before they collapsed. The air was thick with heat and fear. Nobody wanted to drink, but all of them did. Milo's hands shook as he poured. You ever think maybe they didn't die? He said. Maybe the cave-in just changed them. Briggs slammed his glass down. Ain't no man survived 6 months under that rock. Milo nodded, eyes distant. Not a man, no. But the mine don't take kindly to being forgotten. It remembers the ones who fed it. Cole laughed, dry and hollow. You sound like Vale now. Maybe both of you been breathing that poison air too long. Harlan looked up from cleaning a glass. Keller said the same thing before he died and said he heard voices. Briggs shot him a glare. Enough with the damn voices. But the word hung in the air like a curse. Voices, and then from upstairs a slow dragging sound. Like boots across old floorboards. The men froze. Milo's hand went for his revolver. Ain't nobody up there. Not since Vale left that room. The sound came again, slower, heavier. Briggs whispered. Keller? Nobody answered. The stairs creaked once, then silence. Harlan's glass slipped from his hand and shattered. Jonas Vale appeared in the doorway. You shouldn't listen to them when they start walking. Cole spun around, gun half raised. You son of a, where were you last night? By the ridge. You opened that mine again? Jonas smiled faintly. It opened itself. The others stared, trying to read him. But his face, calm, tired, too calm, made their hearts quicken. Ames came in then, the door slamming behind him like a gunshot. Enough! He turned to Jonas. Whatever you're doing here, you're stopping it now. I want you gone. Jonas didn't flinch. You can't make me leave. Oh, I can, Ames growled, hand resting on his holster. This is my town. Jonas's eyes met his, flat and certain. Not anymore. Something in the sheriff faltered. He'd seen killers, soldiers, preachers, but never someone who spoke like truth itself had worn him thin. Briggs broke the silence. Sheriff, maybe he's right. Ames turned, stunned. What? Briggs swallowed. Last night I heard something at my window. Sounded like knocking, slow, 3 times. I thought it was the wind. Jonas said softly. It wasn't. Cole stood up, trembling. You shut your damn mouth, Vale. You brought this here. Jonas looked at him. It was already here. You just buried it. The tension broke like glass. Cole lunged, grabbed Jonas by the collar and slammed him against the bar. You listen to me. Jonas moved faster than anyone saw coming. The gun was in his hand, pressed to Cole's stomach. "Don't," Jonas whispered. "You'll regret it." Ames stepped forward. "Put it down, Vale." Jonas's hand didn't move, but his eyes flicked toward the window. And for a heartbeat, every man there swore they saw something outside. Shapes, standing still in the heat haze. 6 of them. "Jesus," Harlan breathed. The window fogged from the inside, as if something cold had brushed it. Then it cleared. Nothing there. When the men turned back, Jonas was gone. By nightfall, fear had a shape. Ames locked the saloon doors and gathered the men. "We stick together. Nobody leaves, nobody goes near that ridge." But Milo wasn't listening. He sat in the corner whispering to himself. "They called my name last night. They still know me," Harlan hissed. "Milo, stop!" Milo smiled without looking up. "They said there's room for me now." He raised his gun. Before anyone could move, he put it under his chin and pulled the trigger. The room exploded with sound. And then silence again. Briggs began to laugh. Quiet at first, then louder until it turned to sobbing. "We're already dead," he said. "We just ain't laid down yet." Ames dragged the body outside and buried it beside Keller. The ground there felt soft. Too soft. Like something had already been dug from underneath. When he looked up, Jonas was standing at the end of the street, watching. "You can't save them," Jonas said. Ames shouted, "What the hell are you?" Jonas didn't answer. He turned, walking toward the ridge again. And as he went, Ames realized something that froze him to the bone. Jonas left no footprints in the dust. That night, the knocking started again. Louder this time. Not from beneath the floorboards, but from inside the walls. It followed the men room to room. Cole fired his gun twice into the plaster, screaming. The sound stopped for a moment, then came again, closer. Ames whispered a prayer he didn't believe in anymore. Briggs sat rocking in a chair, muttering the names of the dead. The wind outside howled through the cracks, carrying with it a voice. Low, steady, familiar. Jonas Vale, whispering, "Salt Creek remembers." When dawn came, the town was empty. Only Sheriff Ames remained sitting alone on the porch, staring at the mine's black mouth in the distance. He could still hear it. The tapping, the laughter, the voices calling him by name, and somewhere beneath all that, the faint echo of boots walking deeper into the dark. Salt Creek was dead. The wind came and went, dragging dust down the street like shrouds. Doors banged open and closed. The saloon sign swung with no sound. By noon, Sheriff Ames was the only man left standing where law used to mean something. He hadn't slept. His face was cracked from the sun, eyes ringed black. There was no food left, no water, and no reason to stay, except for the knocking. It came with the heat now, steady and slow. Sometimes from the hills, sometimes right behind him. Sometimes it felt like it came from his own chest. He knew it was the mine calling, and he knew he'd go. By dusk, Ames saddled his horse and rode toward the ridge. The air grew colder the higher he climbed, the desert giving way to stone and shadow. At the halfway mark, he saw them. Graves. Half dug, half collapsed. Crosses knocked over by the wind. Keller's grave was open, empty. So was Milo's. He dismounted slowly. The ground was too soft. It shifted under his boots like breathing sand. He whispered to himself, "This ain't real." But the desert didn't answer. He reached the mouth of the mine as the sun sank into blood-red haze. The opening was wider now. Boards splintered, pulled apart from within. A faint breeze came out, cool and wet, smelling like rust and old water. He lit his lantern. "Jonas Vale," he called into the dark. "You down there?" His voice came back to him, warped. "Jonas Vale." Down there, he stepped inside. The tunnels twisted like veins through the earth. Drips echoed from nowhere. His lantern light flickered, carving faces out of stone, shapes that vanished when he looked again. After a while, he stopped hearing his own footsteps. That was when he realized the ground beneath him wasn't dry anymore. It was damp and warm. He raised the lantern. The walls glistened, not with water but with something thicker, black, sticky, like oil or blood. He breathed shallow. "Keep moving, Ames," he muttered. Voices drifted ahead. Not whispers and conversations. Ordinary, casual. Men talking about cards, the weather, the day's work. The voices of his town. Cole, Briggs, he called. The voices stopped. Then one answered, calm and familiar. Ames. Jonas Vale. Ames followed it deeper. The tunnel widened into a chamber. The collapse site. Broken timbers lay scattered. The air was so thick with dust it shimmered. Jonas stood in the middle of it, hat off, lantern at his feet. You shouldn't be here, Jonas said. Ames raised his gun. You killed them all. Jonas shook his head slowly. No, they killed themselves. The mind just remembers. Stop speaking in riddles. Jonas took a step closer, eyes reflecting the lantern flame like polished stone. You ever wonder why Salt Creek never had a preacher stay longer than a month? Why the wells kept drying? Why the mine gave gold for a while, then took men instead? Ames steadied the gun. You talk like the dirt's alive. Jonas smiled faintly. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just tired of being ignored. A faint knocking began somewhere behind them. Slow. Rhythmic. Ames turned toward the sound. 6 shadows stood at the far end of the tunnel. Not moving, just standing. Who are they? He whispered. Jonas didn't answer. The shadows began to walk. Not toward him, but past him like miners at shift change. Their boots left no sound. Their faces were wrong. Skin gray and stretched thin, eyes like holes. One brushed past Ames, and the cold went straight through his chest. His breath came out white. He dropped the gun. Jonas said softly, They remember you too. Ames turned, shaking. I never worked this mine. Jonas looked at him. Didn't you? You've been digging this whole time, Sheriff. Just not for gold. Ames tried to speak, but something in the air pressed against him, heavy and endless. Jonas stepped back toward the tunnel wall, his hand tracing the slick black surface. You feel that? It's the weight of every lie buried under Salt Creek. Every man who swore he didn't hear the knocking. The shadows gathered behind him, blending into the stone. Jonas looked back one last time. You should have left when you had the chance. Then he walked into the wall. Not through it, into it, like the rock swallowed him whole. Ames stumbled forward, slamming his fists against the stone. It was solid. He screamed until his voice broke. The knocking answered, not from the wall but from inside his head. 3 slow knocks. 2 fast, 1 long. He recognized the pattern, the same one they'd heard under the floorboards. He covered his ears, but it didn't stop. The sound was in him now, pulsing behind his eyes. He ran. The tunnels bent the wrong way. His lantern flickered out, leaving only red veins of light crawling along the rock. The air thickened, metallic and sweet. He stumbled into another chamber, smaller, round, like the inside of a lung. And there, laid out in a circle, were 6 minor tags, the ones lost in the collapse. Numbers carved into the dirt. A 7th tag sat in the middle. It read, Jonas Vale, 27 Ames, fell to his knees. No, he whispered. That can't be right. He looked closer. Beneath the tag, half buried, something gleamed. He brushed the dirt away, then froze. It was a star. His star. The sheriff's badge he'd lost years ago when the mine first opened. He sat back, trembling. The ground pulsed once like a heartbeat. Then the whispers came. Sheriff, you never left. The lantern burst back to life, though he hadn't touched it. The light swelled, too bright, too hot. And for a moment Ames saw them all. Keller, Milo, Briggs, Cole, Harlan, even Jonas, all standing around him, eyes hollow. Mouths open, the walls began to breathe. Ames screamed again, and the mind swallowed the sound whole. When he woke, it was daylight. He was lying just outside the mine mouth, covered in dust. His horse was gone. His hands were black with earth. He sat up slowly. Salt Creek lay below him and empty. Every building collapsed. Every window shattered. The town was gone. He turned toward the ridge. The mine was sealed again, the entrance caved in. But carved into the stone above it were 3 words, jagged and crude. Salt Creek remembers. Ames stumbled back, gasping. The knocking had stopped, but the silence was worse. He mounted his horse and rode out across the desert without looking back. Hours later, as the sun set, he looked down and saw his hands still covered in black dust. He tried to wipe them clean, but the dust wouldn't come off. Sheriff Ames rode until the sun melted into the earth and the sky turned to iron. He didn't know how long he'd been riding. Hours, maybe days. All he knew was that the desert kept going. No end. No horizon that stayed still. The dust on his skin had turned to mud with sweat. The black stains on his hands spread up his wrists now, like veins crawling toward his heart. He hadn't seen another man since leaving Salt Creek. Not a campfire, not a wagon track. Only wind and silence. The horse finally collapsed sometime near dusk. Ames climbed off and let it die there, eyes wide and still. He kept walking. Behind him the desert stretched empty. But every few steps he swore he heard footsteps that weren't his own. Soft, careful following. When he turned, nothing. Just wine-tracing shapes in the sand. He kept his revolver in hand now, though he wasn't sure why. The bullets felt useless out here. By nightfall he saw something in the distance and a glow. At first he thought it was lightning, but it didn't fade. Lantern light, maybe. Or fire. He walked toward it, boots dragging. When he got close, he stopped. It was a town. Wood buildings. A church, a saloon. A water well at the center. It looked almost like Salt Creek and only cleaner, new. Fresh paint, windows unbroken, lamps burning steady. Ames rubbed his eyes. "No," he whispered. "You burned down. You're gone," but the air smelled of whiskey and horse sweat. A piano played somewhere down the street. He walked forward. As he passed the saloon, laughter spilled from inside, low and familiar. Men's voices, the same voices he'd buried one by one. He stepped through the swinging doors. Inside, everything was perfect. The same faces, Keller, Briggs, Cole, even Harlan behind the bar, all alive, all talking, drinking, dealing cards. The light was soft. The air smelled of wood oil and smoke. For a moment, Ames thought maybe he'd gone mad in the desert and stumbled into a dream. Then he saw him, Jonas Vale, sitting at the same corner table, hat low, eyes calm. Ames froze. "You're dead." Jonas looked up. "Am I?" The sheriff stared around the room. No one seemed to notice him, not really. Their eyes passed over him like smoke. He stepped closer to the bar. "Harlan," he said, "you see me?" The barkeep didn't answer. He poured a drink for Keller, who laughed. The same hollow laugh from weeks ago. Ames slammed his hand on the counter. "Answer me, damn it!" Harlan's head turned slowly, too slowly. His eyes were empty sockets filled with dust. Ames stumbled back, breath shaking. Jonas rose from his chair. "You never left, Sheriff. You've been walking in circles." "This ain't real," Jonas smiled. "It's real enough for Salt Creek." The piano kept playing, a warped, slow version of an old hymn. One by one, the men stopped talking. Their heads turned toward Ames, their faces dimming into gray and shadow. Jonas stepped closer. "You remember what you said the first day I rode in? You asked how long the road was." Ames's throat tightened. "You said longer than it should have been." Jonas nodded. "You were right." The saloon door swung open behind him. A rush of wind filled the room, cold, thick with dust. The lamps flickered and went out. In the dark, the knocking began again. 3 slow, 2 fast. 1 long, it came from everywhere, the walls, the floor, inside his skull. Ames covered his ears and shouted, "Stop it!" Jonas's voice whispered through the dark. "You buried them wrong. You buried yourself with them." A light flared behind the bar, the lantern. It burned blue now. In its glow, Ames saw the room melting, walls bending, faces sagging into mud and bone. The men were gone. Only shapes remained, twitching like shadows underwater. Jonas walked toward him, his eyes hollow. "The mind isn't a place, Sheriff. It's what's left when men dig too deep into what they shouldn't." Ames fell to his knees. "What do you want from me?" Jonas knelt beside him. "Nothing. You already gave it." He pressed something into Ames's hand, cold metal. Ames looked down. It was his badge, bent and blackened. The name scratched off. When he looked up, Jonas was gone. The saloon was empty. The lamps burned low again, yellow and trembling. Ames staggered outside. The town was quiet. But now he could see the truth. Every building stood half sunk into the sand. The well was dry, the church roof caved in. The whole place was rotting. Bones of a town pretending to breathe. And at the center of it all, where the main road split, the ground had cracked open. A hole. Narrow, deep. The sound came from inside it. Faint knocking, still steady. Ames stepped closer, peered down. The hole went on forever, filled with shifting light. Something deep inside whispered his name. He dropped the badge in. It fell without a sound. He stood there a long time, the wind whispering around him. until he wasn't sure if he was standing at the edge of the hole or if he'd already fallen in. The desert stretched silent again, and far off where the horizon should have been, the outline of Salt Creek shimmered in the heat. The same buildings, the same saloon, the same man on the porch with a shotgun across his knees. Sheriff Ames squinted toward the glow. It looked like him. The figure raised its head like it was looking back. The wind stopped. The knocking began once more, somewhere deep beneath his boots. Slow, patient, endless.